Welcome to the Creator's Journey with the Halfling and the Spaceman. We love talking to creators about their creative journeys, and we are excited to have with us E.J. Isaacs. He is a tea vendor turned author, and his first book, A New Beginning, book one of his Unforgiving Stars series, has been released in October of 2025. And welcome to the show, EJ.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we are certainly glad to have you with us today, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us. We're going to go ahead and get the ball rolling here. We usually like to ask people a little bit about their background and tell us how you came to the decision and when you came to the decision that you wanted to write professionally, because going from a tea vendor to to a serious writer, that's quite a leap. So we'll have to dig into that a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, tea vendor is not was not my primary career. I was in information technology for 45 years, and
Oh,
I
okay.
just retired this summer um, from that. So I consider myself now a full-time writer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the tea business that I have with my wife, we started back in 2008, and we just started to going to conventions with it in 2019, and wish we'd started doing that much earlier. We do very, very well selling our tea at various sci-fi and gaming conventions.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as my writing, goodness, I actually first put down the outline for what is now book one way back in 1992.
Wow.
It was an outgrowth of basically role playing with some friends of mine. And we went through about 2 or 3 years of role playing Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the characters we came up with, a number of whom are right from our role playing group. So they recognized themselves when the book came out. And but I didn't want to play in, Star Trek's universe. Nothing against Gene Roddenberry or anybody else, but I really decided I liked creating backgrounds for the characters and role playing, and I wanted to create my own universe for them to play in.
Sure.
Life was not cooperative to being a writer at the time. I was very much raising my kids and working a very demanding job. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of time for writing until about 2018 is when I sat down and started writing what became this first book,
Mm-hmm.
drafting it. And I stopped and restarted it probably 3 or 4 times before I finally got through it. And then I started attending the Sega Writers Conference. The first time was in 2020, just before the world shut down. And the second time was in 2023, and found that very, very informative to understand writing as a business, the publishing industry, that exists today, not what I thought it was 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And and also how to craft a good book, how to sell your work to a publisher. And it was at that particular conference that I met my publisher, and I didn't get 30 seconds into my 2 minute little pitch. And he said, I'm interested, send me the first few chapters and we'll start talking.
Oh, wow.
Um, so he gave me a lot of great feedback, which caused me to go back and do some rewrites, which is
Mm-hmm.
very common. And that finally led to the final draft being finished up earlier this year and the book coming out just October. I'm already working on book two of that series, so many more things to come.
Very good. Very good. Wow. Well, I apologize. I didn't realize we really knew you in the capacity as a as a tea vendor because we
Right.
had seen you at the conventions with you and your wife. So, and the spaceman referred to you as the tea guy. So,
As the tea guy, absolutely. I'm still the tea guy at the conventions a lot. Um,
Uh, well, you and the spaceman have something in common then with your, with your, I guess you would call it mundane job or whatever, as,
yeah,
what'd you say, information technology or,
right.
yeah,
IT,
yeah, that's, yeah.
basically all things computers and networking.
Hmm. Yeah. That, you guys have something in common.
I can't do the chest stomp because of the microphone. All right, so let me pan over to me and ask the next question.
Sure.
EJ, what are some of the fandom things that kind of got you that you were into when you were growing up and
Oh
got you
my.
where you are now?
I was very much into anything science fiction growing up, all the way back to really early stuff, the original Lost in Space, Twilight Zone, Star Trek when it first came on the air. I'm officially an old guy, so I remember all of that. And in fact, I have a funny story about that. A lot of people who didn't grow up back then may not know that color TV was not exceptionally common in the 1960s when Star Trek came out. And I watched a good deal of Star Trek originally in black and white.
Mhm.
And a good friend of mine, who also got me into science fiction books, lived down the street from me, and his family had the first color television on the whole block.
Mhm.
And he invited me down to watch a Star Trek episode on it one night, and I think it was a mock time, the particular episode. And it was the first one I ever saw in color, and it was absolutely mind blowing. And it's hard for young people to appreciate that who didn't grow up in that time. But yeah, color TV was a big game changer for science fiction.
Hmm.
But any and all science fiction shows at the time, movies, and I always thought there weren't enough of them. Nowadays, I think in the last 10, 20 years, we seem to be flooded with them because finally movie and TV execs realize that it's a moneymaker.
Mm-hmm.
They absolutely did not believe that for a long time, which is why Gene Roddenberry had so many fights with them, and so many other science fiction writers and producers had trouble keeping their shows on the air, even if they got them on the air.
Yeah. Yeah. There have been so many changes in the last, you know, 3 or 4 decades. In terms of the amount that's out there and the the top is so varied now. I mean, it used to be if you said you were into science fiction, that meant there was just a certain number of authors that came to mind that everybody who was into science fiction knew, and
Right.
that was what it was. And now you tell somebody you're into science fiction or you're in fantasy, well, who knows what that is? That's a that's
So many thousands of us now on the market, right?
yeah, exactly. That's like we've talked about the fact that if you say you're into anime, I mean, good heavens, what does that mean anymore, right? It's there's so
Yeah.
many there are so many different genres within anime now
Oh,
that you
yeah.
cannot just say I'm into anime because nobody's going to know what you're actually talking about.
For people who understand it, I even have to qualify, say, yes, I write science fiction. What they always want to know, well, what type of science fiction? And I say space opera.
Right.
And I compare it to, and my publisher compares it to Star Trek and Babylon 5 and shows of that ilk. And the fact that even my publisher compares me to them, I think is a great compliment.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but that's the subgenre of science fiction that I kind of do right now.
Right. Right. Uh, well, when you were a kid, were you like a lot of writers that you always had your nose in a book when you were a kid? And and to take it one step further, did Did other kids at school kind of think you were one of the weird kids
Oh, absolutely.
because of the things that you were into and the fact that you were always, had your own.
Not just reading, but what I read. Science fiction was the cool thing to do growing up by any stretch of the imagination. And so that kind of automatically made me one of the stranger kids, so to speak. Um, so yeah, it definitely put me in a different class of people. As I got older, that wasn't as much of a problem per se, but definitely growing up, it was not fun. Even my own family didn't, they were kind of like, they used to refer to me as the professor. I was always into the sciences anyway and technology, and including what I like to read. And I don't really know of anybody else in my family who's into it like I am.
Well, now that you have started on your career as a full-time writer, do you do you get support from your family and your circle of friends
Oh, yes,
for that?
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
No, they're very happy. I think they were wondering what I was going to do when I was retired, and I had been planning this book for quite a while, and I knew that that's the primary thing I wanted to do once I retired from my first career, so to speak. So I feel like I'm just now launching my second career. And the friends who helped me kind of get interested and started in all of this are still my friends today,
Hmm.
even though we've moved apart quite a bit.
Hmm.
We actually still get together every year in October in Ohio, which is one of the places I lived in for a good chunk of my life, and get together for a long weekend and role play and do some other activities together as a group. And this year I was able to bring my newly released book with me to that get together, and everybody got a copy. So
Oh, nice. Nice. Well, were any of them surprised by that, or did they were like, "Oh, finally"?
they knew in the last few years it was coming, that I'd
Uh-huh.
been talking about it. I think they weren't sure how serious I was, except for one good friend who helped me. He was kind of like my alpha and beta reader and helped me do some editing. And he and I discussed certain elements of the book together. In fact, I'm trying to reciprocate. He's written three novel-length stories already, and I'm trying to help him find a publisher next.
Okay.
Awesome. That is so great.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a good segue to our next question. So, can you tell us about your influences? What is the thing that drives your writing? Where do you pull these ideas from?
Oh my goodness. Um, I've always had quite a vivid imagination, so it had never been difficult for me. Um, as far as the particular books I have, I've always been interested in technology, and not just technology, but how fast it's changing, how it's changing us as a society, what things we will consider every day, 100 years from now, 200 years from now. And I try to bake that into the overall universe, the world building that I've created here. Um, so I've got a lot of other books within the universe that I've created besides this series that I plan to write in the future. But I also have some other completely different ideas, possibly even other subgenres. I have a steampunk time travel book that I've kind of thrown an outline together for that I would like to tackle at some point. So there's also some branching out into some other genres there as well.
That kind of leads me into the question that I was going to ask, which is, I'm looking at your website and the the book that's just been released. It indicates on your website that it's the first of a trilogy of of three books. And you've kind of already answered my question, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of get it out there
Sure.
anyway. And you can this can be one of those things you kind of expand on. But so there's going to be three, and you've already said that you are actually working on the second book in the series. Um, and you've mentioned now that you had some ideas for at least one other series. Do Do you think that you're the type of writer, and maybe you don't know this about yourself at this point, but do you think you're the type of writer that can write different series at the same time? Like write one book for one series and then turn around and write the first book for the next series and then go back and forth?
Don't know yet. I might try to tackle that as I get going more, especially now that I'm doing this more full time.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a notebook full of ideas. Um, this series of books, and this is going to be a 5 book series, this first one. Um, and then I have a prequel trilogy also planned that kind of takes place in time before the events of this story, and then various other single standalone books and short stories at different points in the timeline between present day and 400 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes some of these ideas pop into my head that I want to tackle in those other books that I may yet do that at some point, write some, take a break from one book, start into a whole different series.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they'll all be within the same universe, so to speak, but just different points in the timeline. So there'll be some interrelationships between them. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sounds good. Well, like I said, I wasn't sure if at this point you knew, if that was something you would do or might try to do, or whether you already knew of yourself that you want to focus on one at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, at the moment, I'm trying to get one at a time.
Hmm.
I'm most of the way through the second book. I want to get the draft to my publisher here right at the end of the year and, early the next. Hopefully, because the publishing process can take a while.
Hmm.
Hopefully, it might come out around this time in 2026, if not early 2027. And then, and meanwhile, I'll have book 3, 4, and 5 to do.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of pressure and self-directed pressure. I really want to get this whole 5 book series out, um, and all interconnected to a final story. There's an overarching story arc to all of them, and then take a break. I may write a few short stories and then start tackling some of the other things I have in mind. We'll have to see how it goes.
Well, that's a perfect. It gets us to our next question. One of the things we always ask folks, especially writers, is tell us about your process. How do you go from the idea or even the nugget of an idea through the draft process and
Mm.
get it into a completed work? It's always fascinating.
I have very, very high level outlines of major things that I want to take place in particular books. Like I said, I mapped out this series originally way back in the early 90s, um, with this, with a major set of characters. But I always knew there'd be a lot of other characters and other things involved. I just didn't go into that level of detail at the time. Once I started putting the world details together. What is technology like? How do the starships work in my universe? What weaponry do they have? How do they get from point A to point B? Um, what is life on board a ship 400 years from now look like? What things have happened to humanity that got us to this point in time? Those things took a lot longer to fully develop because I wanted the world building to happen before I got too detailed into the storyline. Overarching, I knew what I wanted to have happen, but I wanted to put all the other details together first. And I took a lot of notes over the years. I filled 3-ring binders full of them. I think it was around 2018 when I first started drafting this first book that I sat down and I put all my notes together using Microsoft OneNote to help me organize them all. Major characters, minor characters, alien races, technology, different categories of things so I could keep it straight, never mind have the readers keep it straight. And then it was a lot easier at that point to flesh out the rest of the outlines for each book. At least that's what works for me.
Yeah. Well, that's something that we have found in talking to so many writers over the years we've been doing this is everybody's process is different. You know, what works for one may not work for another one, and anybody who says you need to do it this way is just ignore them, right? Because you got to find your own way, right?
You have to find what's comfortable for you. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you didn't have any real formal education in terms of writing, like taking writing classes, did you?
Um,
Or did you?
no, although I can say I've learned a lot more in trying to write this book. Um, Business writing, which I was doing in my previous career, is very, very different, obviously, from fiction writing.
Yeah.
Um, and I did an awful lot of that. But it's a very different style of writing. And for a while, for a while, as I was getting this first book written and I was still working in my other career, I'd occasionally get them mixed up. And even my boss was like, "Your whole style is changing." And I said, "Well, it's because I'm writing different stuff at home than I am here at work." But I did to kind of go back and review a lot of just grammar and basic structure, sentence structure, and things again,
Mm.
all the way back from my middle school days. Um, I can actually credit a middle school teacher with actually getting my original interest in writing. He encouraged everybody in the class to write stories. And at the time, in I think eighth grade, I wrote a story about kind of a James Bond character. Um, and always thought I wanted to do that. It's just, again, life got in the way and it was not something that I ever could make time for until just recently.
Hmm. Funny how that life gets in the way
Oh
thing
yeah.
pops up all the time.
Um, I did I did take classes because one of the things that I've written, you might notice it on my website, is I've written the pilot episode of a TV script. And script writing is very, very different from novel writing.
Hmm.
And I did take some online courses in script writing just to make sure I was getting the format of that correct.
Hmm.
Um, and then I have some outlines for basically a whole season's worth of a particular show. It's much, much earlier in the timeline in my universe, and haven't gotten any interest, from anyone in the TV industry on it. Although my publisher pointed out that a script format would work well if I run into a graphic artist that wants to make graphic novels but doesn't have a story. So I have the story, and if I could meet up with a good graphic artist, it would actually make a good graphic novel as well.
Oh.
That's something I'm looking at doing on the side at
Hmm.
some point, and I might take some time also and flesh out those other scripts over
Yeah.
time. So
Oh,
we'll see how it goes.
well, it's good to have options.
Oh yeah, plenty to keep me busy for a while.
Oh yeah.
Well, EJ, that gives us to the point where we asked our guests the most important thing. Where can people find about more about you and find your book?
The primary way to find out about me and my books is on my website, soulinterest.com. My book can also be found on Amazon, and I believe it is also the Kindle version of my book is also available on Amazon. And of course, through my publisher, spacewizardsciencefantasy.com
Hmm.
is my publisher, and I think you guys are familiar with them as well from some of the same conventions we've all gone to.
Oh yeah, yeah. We know Bill Tracy for sure. Um, well, we will make sure to get that in the show notes so people can find you and your book and where to look for your future books. Um, uh, well, it's about time for us to wrap up. So I want to thank you. We want to thank you very
We do.
much
We do.
again.
Hey,
Yeah, Spaceman
don't
over
forget the
here.
spaceman.
Spaceman over here wants to thank you as well for joining us and taking the time to chat with us. It's been great hearing about your journey and to this opportunity for you to explore this new career of yours and finally get a chance to branch out with that creativity. Um,
No, thank you very much. And very enjoyable talking to you about
well, we have certainly enjoyed it.
And we want to thank our audience for joining us today. And we hope you've been inspired by today's guest, E.J. Isaacs. And this is the Spaceman for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.